when they write about, when they'll talk about books they love. White Oleander, my neighbors were raving about. I think that there's a lot of good writing going on. I think the problem is, how do you alert passionate readers to really good books in a way that does not have a commercial basis? You know, Barnes & Noble has a great online book review section, but they essentially are pushing the books that their buyers have taken a big, you know, position on. I mean, I think it's the idea of where do you get sort of the objective, you know, consumer guide for the man or the woman running from, you know, for the plane to Dayton. You know, I was always amazed, for example, like Seabiscuit resonated, Angela's Ashes, Cold Mountain. I mean, I do think that people like to read good books, and I am concerned at the disappearance of kind of a objective guide for people.
That's Natalie, I'll pose this question to you as you start your introduction, because we talked about this on the phone a little bit. One of the greatest ways to get those sorts of recommendations are through independent bookstores. And we've seen the number of independent bookstores shrinking with the recession. Just in the next week or so, Vertigo Books, which is based in College Park, is going to shut down. Today they're having sort of an Irish wake for themselves, unfortunately. But it's just another one closing. And if you can't have an independent bookstore in a college town like College Park with thousands of students, it makes you really wonder how you can have them anymore. And Deirdre, Natalie, that's one of the things we talked about, independent bookstores, which are the type that carry your book. So maybe you could talk, after you introduce yourself, a little bit more about that topic and what you see happening.
Okay. You can hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, great. Again, my name is Natalie Stokes. I am the associate publisher for Black Classic Press. And Black Classic Press has been operating out of Baltimore for a little over 30 years. The owner of the company is Paul Coates, who some of you may be familiar with. He's been active in the community for all of those 30 years and then some, and then plus. And the business started by publishing pamphlets, which I didn't bring any of those here, years ago, which was basically a piece of equipment which someone helped him purchase, and he started publishing pamphlets, which were about 40 pages long, and that's what he sold. And we've grown up a little bit over those 30 years. We now publish, as you mentioned, Walter Mosley. We're the publisher for the Reginald F. Lewis biography. And so, and then we are also doing college texts, and this is one of the most recent ones we've done. And so the press in itself has evolved from being so fixed in what it does in terms of the primary purpose of the press is to do historical books by folks of African descent that have primarily gone out of print. And we've evolved a little bit into something else. And part of that culture is that books will be lost and forgotten, and so part of what we feel is important is keeping them in print, keeping them available so that folks know they exist. Dave and I did talk about my concern about our book culture. Like I am not as concerned about the medium changing, because if folks are reading, I don't care if it's the electronic ebook format, I don't care if it's a regular book, I don't care if it's library, wherever they're getting it from. My concern is that people are reading and that there's always access for everyone to be able to gain knowledge or just to experience what it is to read a book. As I look at our book culture, what I see is the culture that book centers provide. And so when I think about independent bookstores, gay, lesbian, whether it's African American centered, whether it's focused on any culture, those are the ones that are disappearing. But once you go inside one of those bookstores, you get way more than just a shelf of books. You get the culture, you get the art on the walls, you get the conversation, and often the folks who work in those places bring a lot more than the 16-year-old high school student. Don't want to offend anyone, but they bring a little bit more usually than the 16-year-old high school student who's just looking for a part-time job. And so as I look at what's going on in our culture around books, even libraries are, they're cutting hours and things along those lines, and that's another place of culture. And so, and that's where we go to get more than just books. So that's one of my concerns. And that's not the only place. Like I balance that with your comments around Barnes & Noble. because having worked and having published folks like Walter Mosley, the window goes to the highest bidders. And that's not necessarily the best book that's out there at that time, or the book that we all need to be reading, or whatever it is. Those are who's paying for the window. And as I look at the books that we publish, and I'm going to speak from a black publishing standpoint, that's just what I represent. I can't speak for everyone else. But when I go into Barnes and Nobles or Borders, the African American section is 2 shelves wide, and it's got to capture everything that's ever been of African American interest, and it's just not effective. It's just not useful. It just isn't complete. And so that's the other concern when I balance off the materials that we provide. Again, and next to the African American section, I'm sorry, I'm jumping, but next to the African American section is usually the women's studies section, and that's the next shelf. And then you get gay and lesbian right next to that. So it's just like, sometimes I walk into the stores, I know I'm being recorded, but sometimes I walk into those stores and there may as well be a for colors only sign up there. Okay? Because that's what I feel like it's done. It's like, you get to stay right here if you want books about you. Like, this is your section, enjoy it. Choose from that, and that's it. So that's my other concern around what's happening in our book culture.